Before we get started with today's episode, we want to preface it by providing a trigger warning for everyone who's tuning in. We will be discussing abuse, as well as the timeline of the heinous acts that Gacy committed against men and teenage boys. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. Hey True Crime Besties, and welcome to part 2 of the monster behind the killer clown mask, John Wayne Gacy, right here on Beyond the Crime Scene. I'm Jen.
And I'm Sam.
And today we're diving deeper into the horrifying case of John Wayne Gacy and the timeline of his heinous acts leading up to his execution in 1994.
In 1967 to 1968 is when Gacy was first accused of sexual assault. Gacy, a restaurant manager and a father of 2, living in Waterloo, Iowa at the time, sees his family man image shattered when 2 high school boys described to authorities how he served them alcohol, forced them to watch pornography films, and initiated sexual contact. One also claims that Gacy attempted to strangle him. Gacy, who hires high school seniors to intimidate one of the boys into remaining silent, a move that backfires. On December 3rd, 1968, Gacy is sentenced to 10 years behind bars. This was 1 month after he pleaded guilty for preying on the teenage boys. June 18th, 1970, Gacy is granted parole. He was reportedly a well-behaved prisoner. Gacy is allowed to leave the state of Iowa. He divorced from his wife, and his abusive father is now deceased. He moves to his hometown of Chicago to live with his mother. February 12th of 1971, Gacy again draws the attention of authorities. A teenage boy told Chicago police that Gacy picked him up from a bus station and tried to force him into having sex. The charges are dropped when the boy fails to show up to testify in court. August of 1971, Gacy and his mother settle into a new home off of Summerdale Avenue in the Norwood Park Township in Chicago. January 3rd, 1972, Gacy kills his first victim. Returning to the bus station, Gacy picks up his first known murder victim, later identified as Timothy McCoy. After bringing the teenager home, where they would drink and engage in sexual acts, Gacy stabs him to death and buries him in his crawl space.
Oh my goodness.
Now, mind you, he was living with his mother at this time. July 1st, 1972, Gacy gets married to Carol Hoff, a childhood friend. She notices a strange smell coming from the crawl space, but her husband blames it on the runoff from a sewer pipe and attempts to stifle the smell by spreading concrete and lime in the area. July 31st, 1975, a young associate of Gacy's goes missing. John Butkovich, one of many young men and teenagers hired through the PDM Contractors, that's the contract company that Gacy owned. He disappears after a heated confrontation with Gacy over unpaid wages. His car is found near his parents' home the following day with the key in the ignition. Butkovich is later identified as Gacy's third murder victim. January 1976, police decide to stake out Gacy's home after the complaints began to pile up. Police camped out at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue after a 9-year-old boy prostitute is reported missing. I don't even understand
a
that.
9-year-old boy
that
prostitute?
Is horribly sad and terrifying. Attempts to question the young man coming and going from the house failed to uncover any relevant evidence. March 2nd of 1976, Gacy divorces his second wife. Already living alone, Gacy separates from Carol. During this time, he begins appearing more frequently around the town as his alter ego, Pogo the Clown. He also picks up the pace on his murderous spree, claiming another 24 victims from April 1976 to the end of 1977. March 21st, 1978, Gacy attacks a man in his car. After he lured Jeff Rignall into his car with an offer to smoke marijuana, Gacy subdues the 26-year-old with a chloroform-soaked rag, tortures and rapes him at his home, and then dumps him out in the park. Rignall, who accepts $3,000 to settle the legal charges, goes on to recount the experience in his book 29 Below.
December 11th, 1978 is when Gacy's final murder victim puts police on his trail. When 15-year-old Robert Peist goes missing after telling his mom he intends to see someone about a high-paying job, police follow the trail of witnesses to Gacy's home. Unlike many of the other runaways and dropouts who wound up in Gacy's clutches in the middle of the night, Peist is a popular high school student with strong ties in the community. Gacy's lawyer later theorizes that his client began getting more careless about his killings with the hope of getting caught. December 13th, 1978, so just a few days later, Gacy's home is searched. When investigators find a receipt linked to Peist, Gacy is put on around-the-clock surveillance. December 20th, 1978, Gacy reveals his crimes to his lawyer. After a week of being followed, an inebriated Gacy admits to his new lawyer, Sam Amarante, that he had tortured, raped, and killed at least 30 young men. An investigating officer later recalled the horrified lawyer's instructions to him, "Don't let Gacy leave." December 21st through the 22nd of 1978, Gacy is arrested, leading to his confession. He's apprehended when seen handing a bag of marijuana to a gas station clerk, prompting another home search that reveals the first discovery of human remains. The following day, the suspect delivers a rambling statement to police in which he confesses to killing more than 30 young men and boys, with most buried in his crawl space and the rest thrown into the Des Plaines River, though Gacy later attempts to retract his confession. My goodness. This is insane.
You already confessed to it.
Right. You confessed to your lawyer. Now you confess to police.
April 23rd, 1979. Gacy is indicted for a total of 33 murders. After being charged with 7 murders in early January of 1979, Gacy is indicted for another 26 by a grand jury, the total representing the largest number charged to one person in American history.
Gacy's trial in 1980 centered on whether he could be declared insane. His elaborate defense claiming multiple personalities added a chilling layer to the courtroom drama. Despite his plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, the prosecution argued he was sane and in control of his actions. I believe so.
I do too.
In March 1980, Gacy was found guilty of 33 murders, solidifying his place as one of America's most ruthless serial killers. Gacy spent 14 years in prison, appealing his sentence and offering contradictory statements on the murders. His unexpected venture into the visual arts, particularly painting, raised eyebrows. After the Supreme Court's refusal to hear Gacy's final appeal, his execution date was set for May 10, 1994. Gacy's last words, reportedly, "kiss my ass," reflected his unrepentant nature until the end. Even after his execution, questions lingered about additional victims. Recent DNA testing identified some previously unidentified remains, adding new chapters to this chilling saga. A 1992 television movie titled To Catch a Killer explored the efforts to find out what happened to the missing teenage boys, who were later discovered to be among Gacy's victims. The movie starred Brian Dennehy, Michael Riley, and Margot Kidder. And Dennehy, who played Gacy, was nominated for an Emmy Award. According to Dennehy, Gacy wrote a letter to him from prison, protesting his portrayal in the film and proclaiming his innocence. Ugh, dude, you know you're guilty.
In his mind, he doesn't think he is, even though he confessed.
Yeah, you confessed. All the evidence points to you. Who else was it? When they have an alter ego, they think that it's the alter ego.
Yeah, he thought that it was Pogo or Patches that did it, and not John Wayne Gacy.
Netflix also released Conversations with a Killer, the John Wayne Gacy tapes, on April 20th, 2022, featuring interviews with people involved with the case and archival audio footage from Gacy's incarceration. It's the second entry in Netflix's Conversations with a Killer documentary series, for the first of which focused on serial killer Ted Bundy.
So just a random fact for everybody. If you are local to the area, John Wayne Gacy actually got executed at Stateville Prison. Yeah. And obviously nobody ever wanted to claim his body, so he's still buried in the unmarked cemetery there.
Sam and I live about 45 minutes apart, but
I drive past that area.
She has to drive past it to come see me, and it's only about a 25-minute drive from me. That's creepy.
Yeah. And there's the signs out there that say, "Please do not pick up hitchhikers."
Yeah.
Anyway, random fact for you. That's where Gacy was executed. Mm-hmm. A couple chilling quotes from the monster behind the killer clown mask. A clown can get away with murder. I should have never been convicted of anything more serious than running a cemetery without a license. I'm so glad that this monster was literally executed. Like,
well, how do you claim your innocence and then make statements like that? That's sick.
Guys, I can't even. We really would like to shed some light just for a couple minutes to end the episode out on Gacy's victims. The victims deserve to be known. They deserve to have that voice. And we would just like to talk about his victims for a couple minutes and
share a little bit about who they were.
Yeah. All right, Jen, go ahead and kick it off.
All right, so we're going to start talking about Gacy's first known victim. The rest of the victims are not in any particular order. We're not going in order of the timeline that they were killed, but we do just want to shed some light on each victim because they deserve, like Sam said, they deserve a voice. So Timothy Jack McCoy was 16 years old. He was raised in Iowa and Nebraska. He had stopped for a layover at the Greyhound bus station in the Loop while traveling home January 3rd, 1972. Gacy did confess to picking him up, and this was his first known victim.
The next one really makes me sad because especially the ones that don't have a name or never have got to have a name, they don't get to have a voice. But victim number 28, you were between the ages of 14 and 18 years old. You were an unidentified white male between 5'6" and 5'11". Your disappearance was between January 3rd, 1972 and July 31st of 1975.
John Butkovich was 18 years old. He left his family's home in Chicago July 31st, 1975, and was heading for Gacy's house. The Lane Tech dropout had quit working for the contractor after 8 months and planned to show up on Summerdale Avenue to demand his final paycheck. His body was the first to be uncovered by police.
Francis Wayne Alexander, 21 to 22 years old. Wayne, he was raised in North Carolina and he moved to Chicago in around February 1975. He marries but soon divorces, and no one hears from him afterwards. Alexander's family just assumed that he wanted to be left alone, and they don't submit a missing persons report. He disappears between November 1976 and March 1977, according to police. His body was found in Gacy's crawlspace on December 26, 1978. He's identified through a DNA profile match with a potential relative on a genealogy website. His identity is announced by the Cook County Sheriff's Office in October of 2021.
Wow, it took all that time.
I'm happy that all of these men are starting to get a voice. I hope that in the years to come, the rest of the victims do get to have their voice.
Yeah, that they're identified because there's more. Moving on to Daryl Sampson, who was 19 years old. Unfortunately, not much is known about Sampson other than the fact that his body is found in Gacy's crawlspace, and he was eventually identified between November 1979 and March 1980.
Samuel Stapleton, you were 14 years old. You were one of Gacy's youngest victims. You disappeared during a walk home from your sister's Chicago residence on May 13, 1976. His mother and stepfather reported him missing the next day. One distinctive clue leads his family to believe Stapleton is dead. A bracelet found on one of the bodies in Gacy's crawl space.
Oh my goodness.
Their suspicions were confirmed November 14, 1979, when Stapleton is identified by an earlier x-ray of his head that included outlines of his teeth.
Randall Reffett, 15 years old. It is not known what he was doing before disappearing on May 14, 1976. His body is found by police in the crawl space under the front door of Gacy's house on December 25, 1978. Reffett is identified by an x-ray taken earlier at Weiss Memorial Hospital after he suffered a stab wound. The x-ray includes his jaw and some teeth, which confirms his identity on April 11, 1979, almost 3 years after he went missing.
Michael Bonin, 17 years old. A fishing license found inside Gacy's house belonging to the Chicago resident is the first clue of what happened to Bonin following his June 3, 1976 disappearance. A body in Gacy's crawlspace is identified as Bonin on January 6th of 1979.
William Carroll, 16 years old. The Chicago youth with a penchant for getting in trouble disappears on his older brother's birthday, June 13, 1976. Carroll had promised his father he would return in an hour before getting into a dark-colored car with 3 or 4 other teens. A body discovered in Gacy's crawl space is confirmed with dental records to be Carroll on March 17, 1979.
Victim number 26. You were between 22 and 30 years old. You were an unidentified white male. You were between 5'2" and 5'6". You disappeared between June 13th, 1976 and August 6th of 1976.
Jimmy Hawkinson, 16 years old. Hawkinson, a native of St. Paul, Minnesota, calls his mother August 5th, 1976, to tell her he had arrived in Chicago. That was their last conversation. DNA supplied by a brother and sister at the encouragement of a nephew confirms the body found almost 40 years prior in Gacy's crawl space. It was confirmed to be the body of Jimmy.
Victim number 13. You were between 17 and 21 years old. You were an unidentified white male between 5'11" and 6'2". You disappeared between August 6, 1976 and October 5th of 1976.
Victim number 21. You were between the age of 21 to 27 years old. You were identified as a white male between 5'8" to 6 feet, and you disappeared between August 6, 1976 and October 25th, 1976.
Rick Johnston, 17 years old. The Bensonville resident and high school student is dropped off at the Oregon Ballroom in Chicago by his mother to attend a concert August 6th of 1976. A body removed from Gacy's crawl space was confirmed by dental records to be Johnston on January 1st of 1979.
William George Bundy, who was 19 years old. An accomplished diver and gymnast, Bundy tells his family he's heading to a party in October 1976. They notice he leaves his wallet behind. For 35 years, his final destination would be unknown, until a renewed effort by Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart confirms with DNA provided by his siblings that Bundy is an unidentified Gacy victim. It's suspected Bundy worked for Gacy, but that hasn't been officially confirmed.
Michael Marino, 14 years old. Marino and longtime friend Kenneth Parker, who was 16, were last seen on October 24, 1976, near a restaurant at Clark Street and Diversey Parkway, an intersection where Gacy picked up many of his victims. Investigators believe the friends may have been killed at the same time because they shared a common grave under Gacy's house. Marino's mother submits 2 sets of dental records as well as x-rays which are used to identify him on March 29th of 1980. But years later, Marino's mother claims the remains she buried were not those of her son.
Kenneth Parker, who was 16 years old. Parker and longtime friend Michael Marino, who was 14, were last seen October 24, 1976, as Sam just mentioned, near a restaurant at Clark Street in Diversey. Dental records and x-rays of an arm Parker had previously broken were used to identify him March 29, 1980. His body was exhumed in 2016 for DNA testing at the request of Marino's mother, who claims her son is not a Gacy victim.
We might have to follow up with these two.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine being Michael Marino's mother in any of this or any of their mothers or brothers, sisters, fathers. She could have just been in denial as well, which I really pray that she has found at least a little bit of peace and comfort over the years.
And maybe some closure. I mean, if they had x-rays and things to identify him, it was most likely him. I think that was probably her just in denial. And I can't even imagine how she felt, so I don't blame her whatsoever.
Gregory Godzik, 17 years old. He was a senior who worked for Gacy. He left his house around 8 p.m. on December 11th, 1976 for a date with his girlfriend, but he never returns. Friends find his abandoned car and his family hires a private investigator, but neither yield new information. Godzik's girlfriend goes to Gacy's house to question him about Godzik's disappearance, and Gacy says Godzik told him he was going to run away. Godzik's body is found in the crawl space and identified through dental records in January of 1979. Gacy claims during his trial that Godzik dug his own grave. God, that is sick.
Goodness. John Zick, who was 19 years old. It was unclear what he was doing before disappearing January 20th, 1977. On December 15, 1978, police find a Maine West High School ring in Gacy's home that belongs to Zick. A body found in Gacy's crawl space is identified through dental records as John Zick in January 1979.
John Prestige, 20 years old, a Kalamazoo, Michigan native who comes to Chicago to visit a friend and finds work with a Chicago contractor. It's unknown if that contractor was Gacy, but he was last seen alive March 15, 1977, meeting a friend for coffee in a restaurant near Bughouse Square. Dental records provided by his mother confirmed in January of 1979 that a body found in the crawl space of Gacy's house is John Prestige.
Victim number 10. You were between the age of 17 to 21 years old. You are an unidentified white male between 5'7" and 5'11", and you disappeared between March 15th, 1977 and July 5th, 1977.
Matthew Bowman, 18 years old. The Crystal Lake native is reported missing by his sister on July 5th of 1977. A body found in Gacy's crawl space is confirmed to be Matthew Bowman on January 27th of 1979.
Robert Gilroy. Robert Gilroy was 18 years old. The son of a Chicago police sergeant, Gilroy tells his parents he's going to a horseback riding lesson September 15, 1977. However, it turns out he hadn't attended his scheduled lessons for weeks. He isn't reported missing until September 27, 1977, since he was believed to have traveled to Maryland for a special class. The Gilroy family lives 4 blocks from Gacy's home, but no link between the two could be made. A body found in Gacy's crawl space is confirmed with dental records to be Gilroy on January 6, 1979.
John Mowry, 19 years old. You had just completed 18 months with the Marines when you returned to Chicago in early 1977, stops by his family's house to say he's going out for the night on September 25th, 1977, the last time he's seen alive. His sister Judith was murdered 6 years prior. A body... That's so sad.
Wow.
I can't even imagine that family. A body found in Gacy's crawl space is confirmed with dental records to be John Mowry on January 27th of 1979.
That's terrible. I want to look more into that too and see.
That's so heartbreaking.
Could you imagine both of your children murdered?
Nope.
My goodness. Russell Nelson, who was between the ages of 21 or 22 years old, the engaged University of Minnesota student, was Gacy's first victim from outside the Chicago area, calls his mother to wish her a happy birthday October 17, 1977. He is not heard from again. Nelson's mother says her son came to Chicago with another young man to work for a contractor. It is unknown if that contractor is Gacy. Nelson is identified January 6, 1979 through dental records, so clearly it was Gacy.
Yeah. Robert Winch, 18 years old. Winch moves to Chicago from Kalamazoo, Michigan, where he had been in trouble after running away from a foster home. He is last seen alive November 11, 1977. A distinctive tiger's eye belt buckle found inside Gacy's house is linked to Winch, but he's ultimately identified September 12, 1979 by markings on bones that had been broken in an accident and then healed.
Tommy Bowling, 20 years old. The married father of a 3-year-old son, Timmy, disappears November 18, 1977, from his Chicago home. Bowling's sister tells reporters he was using drugs at the time of his disappearance. His wedding ring and dental records confirm on September 12, 1979, that a body found in Gacy's crawl space is that of Tommy Bowling.
David Talsma, 20 years old. It's unknown what the Chicago resident was doing before he disappeared December 9, 1977. His body is recovered from Gacy's crawl space November 16th of 1979 and what would have been his 21st birthday. David Talsma is identified through x-rays of his left arm.
William Kindred, 19 years old. The Chicago resident's girlfriend, Mary Jo Paulus, who met Kindred when he picked her and a friend up while they were hitchhiking on the north side in July 1977, reports him missing after he fails to arrive at her house February 16, 1978. Paulus knew Gacy, but it's unclear if Kindred did too. Police develop information that Kindred was picked up by Gacy near Diversey Parkway and Broadway. His body is found in Gacy's crawl space, and his identity is confirmed with dental records May 21, 1979.
Timothy O'Rourke, 20 years old. disappears June 30th, 1978. Friends say he was a frequent to gay bars, which Gacy was known to also prowl. A body recovered June 30th, 1978, near the Dresden Island Lock and Dam in the Illinois River, just 3 miles from where 2 more bodies were found. It is identified through fingerprints as Timothy O'Rourke. His body also bears an unusual tattoo on the left arm that reads Tim Lee.
Frank Landingen, 19 years old. It's unknown what the Chicago resident was doing prior to his disappearance, November 4th, 1978. Police link his death to Gacy on December 26, 1978, after they discover some of his personal items inside Gacy's home. Landingen's naked body is found in the Des Plaines River at Channahon in Will County on November 12, 1978. He had died of asphyxia after a pair of bikini briefs were stuffed in his throat. He is identified by his father, fingerprints, and dental records.
James Mazzara, 20 years old, the Elmwood Park resident, disappears November 23, 1978. Gacy admits to dumping the body of a youth named Mojo into the Des Plaines River. Mazzara's nickname is Mojo. Mazzara is Gacy's next to last victim. A cause of death could not be determined for Mazzara, whose body was found in the Des Plaines River at Channahon on December 28, 1978. He is identified through his fingerprints.
And Gacy's last victim, Robert Peist, who was 15 years old. The Maine West honor student ends his shift at the pharmacy in Des Plaines on December 11, 1978. He tells his mother to wait inside while he talks with a man outside about a construction job. He disappears. Inside Gacy's house on December 13, 1978, police discover a receipt for a roll of film being developed. The Peist family says the receipt belongs to a female friend of their son. Police conclude Peist was in Gacy's house, and Gacy was arrested December 21, 1978. Police conclude Peist was in Gacy's house, and Gacy was arrested December 21, 1978. Gacy confesses to dumping Peist's body in the Des Plaines River. Peist's body is recovered and positively identified April 9, 1979.
To all of the victims and all of the victims that are probably still out there, I just hope that all of you rest in peace. I hope that your family can find some closure over the years. I know there's no closure to really be found with having such a monster do these awful, awful things to your children, your brothers, your friends.
Your husbands. Some of them were married.
Yeah.
Fathers, some of them had children.
I can't even fathom any of this. And Gacy saying his quote, "Clowns get away with murder." You didn't get away with murder, buddy.
Nope.
Hate to break it to you. This is one of the most sick and twisted things that, I have no words.
Yeah,
I'm just disgusted.
This is definitely one of the most heinous, I'd say, acts of a lot of the serial killers that we'll be covering. It's sad. I mean, any serial killer we cover it's going to be difficult. Mm-hmm. But moving forward, we just want to make sure that we're taking the time to go through the timeline of events we're going through and giving the victims voices and talking a little bit about who they were. But we're going to wrap it up here today. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Beyond the Crime Scene. Until next time, stay vigilant and never forget the victims who stood beyond the crime scene.